Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next version of Brands Connect. Super duper excited to be here with one of my personal favorites, Renata. I'm sure many people in the SMR world who are watching this today probably know who you are from several amazing presentations you've done in the last couple of years at the Insights Festival and at the Client Connect. But for that small few people who don't know who you are, let's just start with a quick introduction about yourself. So tell us who you are, what you're doing now, and how did you get into the insights industry?
So, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you. So, as you mentioned, my name is Renata Policicio, and today I lead the Global Markets Research and Insights team at ESPN. So, all in into the sports world, but I have now more than 20 years of experience with research, especially with media and entertainment. Started my career as an intern at an ad agency, already with research, and then just fell in love with the field. And from there, kept really developing, especially my media research side and expertise. Work with all kinds of methodologies, methods that you can imagine. And right now, answering questions about how our fans consume and engage with sports.
Yes, you do have a very cool job. And I know most recently we saw you speak at the Insights Festival and you were talking about the power of storytelling. And I'm just curious, I think we use that word a lot in Insights, right? The importance of storytelling. So maybe tell us what your definition of storytelling is and why you think it's important.
So at ESPN, we say that everything we do tells a story. Not only at ESPN, at Disney, as at a larger scale, but talking about ESPN, we really believe that not only the more classic story formats like ESPN films or documentaries, but we go beyond that. We really think that even when we are broadcasting a football game, that is a story. We are telling a story. And through that story, we want to engage with fans in a level that goes beyond the regular and again classical format of broadcasting a game. So we really believe, and I think that's core at Disney and core at ESPN, in the power of storytelling, in the power that stories have to really connect with people, human beings, and it's. I really believe that what's one thing that really differentiates us from other animals is our ability to tell stories, is our ability to connect with other humans through storytelling. And it's really fantastic to work for a company that believes in the power of stories as well. And talking about specifically data storytelling, or really how to move from data to insights and to wisdom, I really believe that I don't want to say the only way, but the most powerful way to engage an audience, again, still talking about insights and data, but to engage an audience with the insights is through storytelling. It's using the same principles of the best stories that you can remember. If I ask you what's your favorite movie or your favorite story, you'll probably be able to tell me at least a couple of reasons why you like or enjoyed that story. So I really believe that if we can use the principles of effective storytelling to the way we translate and we move data to insights and to wisdom and to really actionable insights for the business, if we can use those principles, we will all be more effective in the way that we, as insight teams, impact the businesses in an actionable way.
Yeah, I totally agree with the importance of storytelling. I heard one time, I think there's only like five or seven unique storylines in the world. Isn't that true? Like in journalism, they say that, and everything else is an offshoot from that. Do you use any tools or principles from journalism for Accenture or other places in the world to help you think through your principles, training, capability of storytelling at ESPN?
Absolutely. So talking about classic storytelling, yeah, there are these classical plots of stories that, especially on the entertainment side, we are used to seeing, right? I will mention a couple. One is rags to riches. So the story of someone who came
Mm.
from a humble origin and became this, in sports, you can think about many stories. We just showed Michael Jordan on The Last Dance, and we were able to show only one part of the plot was really rags to riches, but we showed how he started in
Mm.
a humble, family and became Michael Jordan. So that is one. The other one that is very popular with sports is the story of overcoming obstacles, right? So, just to give an example, we had a fantastic story about this hockey team in Colorado that suffered a terrible accident, bus accident, and almost the whole team got killed in that accident. So
Oh,
it was
yeah.
a
Hmm.
classic story of overcoming a very sad tragedy and really a big challenge. That university had to rebuild the whole team with new players, some of them who had very little experience with the sport. So that is another kind of plot, really overcoming a big challenge or overcoming a tragedy or a struggle to become who you are and on your path to success. So that is more about really how we tell stories. But thinking about again insights and data storytelling, I think there's so many principles, there's so many lessons that we can take from storytelling in our day to day, and we can talk more about some of them. But first of all, know your audience. Really try to think ahead on who you're presenting that, who you're talking to, before anything. You shouldn't have one presentation that fits all. You should be really thinking if you're presenting that to the marketing team or to the engineering team. You should be using really different, at least different language to connect with those two audience. The second one is being provocative to insights. That's a big one on storytelling in general that I think professional insights can take more advantage of. Really be provocative, pose the questions and help people thinking about it together during the presentation. So be more provocative through your data instead of just showing charts and numbers. I think that's a big challenge that data analytics and insights professionals have today. We see more and more data coming our way from our internal systems and our research, but with all that data, you need a human brain. You need someone to make sense of it all and really build a coherent story that can engage and connect with whoever is receiving on the other end. So I think more than ever, with the tons of data that we have, storytelling is more essential than ever on insights.
Yeah, totally agree. And I often think about what I have a hypothesis, but I want to hear what you say first. Why is it that as an industry, largely, we're so terrible at it? I mean, there are pockets of
Well,
excellence. So those of you doing it well, there are pockets of excellence, but largely, most insights people aren't great at storytelling.
I think there are different reasons. I think this is something that's not new. It's not something that data storytelling is not a new topic. But I think the reason why we are hearing more about it is because more and more our industry is going to angles in data science, really data and analytics focused, and
Hmm.
we just have more data in our hands. But I really don't believe that just having more data is enough. I think we have to make sense of all of that and understand how that impacts the business. And again, the best way to connect with whoever is on the other side of at the other side of the table is really building a narrative. Uh, and I agree with you that the industry as a whole is not the best in doing that. But I see the challenge becoming even bigger as professionals come from a more, let's say, data science, a more scientific perspective, and not a human, without a human background. So I think it's a challenge. I absolutely believe that all of us can learn how to do it better. All of us can really start paying more attention to how we translate and transform, as I say, data to insights to wisdom, and wisdom that can
Hmm.
actually impact the businesses in an actionable way. I think all of us from all backgrounds can learn and can pay more attention to those. But as we get more scientific with data, as we have AI even more present in our day to day, we have to more and more pay attention on how we use storytelling to translate all of those massive data sets into insights.
Yeah, no, I
I don't know
totally
if you
agree.
agree
And
with this.
yeah, oh, I 100% agree. And I think you're right there. There's a lot of data and we need to find a way to make sense of it. And there's also, I believe, a belief system with insights folks that it's our job to be the voice of the truth and to be right and to be factual. And that leads towards a bias of sharing data, but without the feeling and the story and the provocation, because they don't want to bias people. But what I always tell my people is that's like in any good story, you know from the very beginning of the movie or the show who's the hero and who's the villain, and that helps you to follow along in the story and then feel how you're going to feel about what's going on. Now it might be plot twists, but you need those anchors of who all the characters are in the story. And imagine if we created a whole movie where you were never clear on who's who, right? And that's what we do all the time with insights. And I'm always telling people, you have to let the audience know how to feel about what you're showing them. So if you show them all this data and you don't tell them this is good, this is bad, this is the hero, this is the bad guy, they don't know what to do with what you're telling them. So I think there's this, we got to get people over this hump of I have to be 100% factual and neutral, to storytelling helps people to actually get your point across.
I think you have a great point. The best stories are the ones that make you feel something, not in every way, independent of what kind of story you are listening or watching, is that story that brings your emotion, right? And I absolutely agree with
Mm-hmm.
you. I think insights professionals think that it's not our job to make people feel something. It's not our job to bring emotion to our stories. Our job is to show numbers and to show data. And I absolutely agree with you, because the stories that stick with you, the stories that you remember, are the ones that made you feel something, that add that little bit of
Mm-hmm.
provocation. And if you ever saw my presentation on storytelling, relatability is the number one, by far the most important aspect of any story for you to connect with the story. So I think we need to really start including that kind of element of relatability, is really connecting in a more emotional
Mm-hmm.
level as much as we can with data. And I totally agree with you that our industry believes that it's not our job, that if you make people feel something, you'll be, integrating a bias that you don't want to do it. But there are ways to be
Mm-hmm.
provocative, and there are ways to add that kind of emotional layer without losing credibility, without, moving away from the truth and really the inside story that you wanna communicate.
Yeah, agree. So, how did you learn to tell relatable and empowering and powerful stories? What formal tips or tricks or training, or you just were naturally great at it?
No, we had to. I had to learn it, and I think the first one is really I had bad experience telling data stories. I sometimes in the beginning of my career had this, didn't really evaluate or think about who I was talking to. And I started at advertising agencies, and it makes a difference who you're talking to when you're presenting data. So yeah, a lot of making mistakes to understand that. But I have always been a big fan of storytelling, even before uh, thinking on a data perspective. So I have always been very interested in psychology of telling stories, the human side of telling stories.
Mm-hmm.
So one day I just thought, okay, what are the principles or the reasons why we connect to stories? What are those, and how can I apply to what I do every day? On how I share data every day, right? How I share insights every day. So you mentioned some tips and techniques. I think the very first one that I learned really, really early in my career by making mistakes is, again, think about your audiences. Don't think that when you have a data set and you transform that into a one sheet or a PowerPoint or whatever tool you're using, don't think that that format will fit everyone or will fit every audience that you have to show that to. So first of all, first lesson to build some connection and relatability is know who you're talking to. And I think storytelling masters on an entertainment side really do that really well, right? When they're thinking about the story, they think about who their main target audience is. And I think we should always think about it and do a better job as an industry in doing that. And the second one is that I mentioned is really not being afraid of being a bit provocative through our stories. There is one thing that I always tell my team, and depending on who you're talking to, data scientists even get a little bit scared when I say that. Use suspense in your presentation. Don't think that you have to give away all the insights in the very first slide. There's
Mhm.
one thing that I know will be polemic, but I'll say it anyway. I think the where executive summaries should be in a presentation, if you need to have one, is in the back, in the end of the presentation, or in your first slide. You don't want your audience to think after 5 minutes that they know everything that you're presenting. Use, your story as a build-up and use suspense if you don't want to use that word, but you build up expectation through your presentation, right? So that is a classic, very classical principle of storytelling that we should use more. Be more provocative and really build up to the main insights. Don't put your executive summary and your main insights in your very first slide. Again, that is a by itself a provocative tip, but that I truly
Yeah.
believe start with an agenda and with an executive summary.
Yeah. So can I make one build on each of those? So for the
Sure thing.
target who you're talking to, the number one response I get to that. But what if I'm presenting, for example, to a leadership team with very different personalities, et cetera? The one thing that we always say is then figure out who's the actual real decision maker and target them. And we work with this company who I think are the smartest people in the world called Blue Dog Design. You should look them up. They're amazing. But they have a model called heart, head, and gut. I don't know if you've ever used that, but if you can figure out how the leader or the decision makers makes choices, do they use their heart, do they use their head, or do they use their gut, then it's really easy to tailor their presentation. But a lot of times what stops people from tailoring, they say it's because they don't have time, but really it's because they're not really sure how to tailor it. And I found that that was like a really easy model for tailoring. But the Susensis, the executive summary was never meant for sharing first. It was always meant for when you're just sending out a presentation or a memo or whatever. If somebody only has a few minutes, read this, right? But you're right, it's so misused because it's now become the standard for how we do presentations, where we tell them the punchline, and then why should anybody bother to listen to the rest of the presentation?
To your first point about leadership, leadership in general digests insights in a different way. They tend not to have a ton of time. So think about that. Even if you, let's say you don't know who the real decision maker is, think about if you only have 15 minutes, if you only had 10 minutes as a leader to try to really understand what the main takeaway of that presentation is, that matters a lot. Don't try to pack a 1 hour presentation to a leader because he or she won't have the time, and the way they digest information is different than most people. So that's a big learning.
Mm-hmm. It's like a trailer versus the whole movie. Okay, so because we only have a few more minutes, I want to make sure I get a couple more questions in from you. But semi tangential related to training and tips, if you had somebody brand new, like first week, not just on the job at ESPN, but also being a market researcher, what advice would you give that person?
That's a great question. I think for someone really starting with insights, my main advice is be curious. Be curious. If you're starting, don't think you know it all only because you look at a number. Try to understand the why behind it. I think that's the beauty of insights. Is how you translate
Mm-hmm.
again data to wisdom, right? So be curious. And that's something that guided me my whole career. And it's one of the reasons why I work with research and insights. Be curious. Don't just take, don't just build the graph and don't look at how the graph looks and ask, okay, does this make sense and why this is happening? So above all, be curious. And that doesn't only apply when you are a junior professional starting. That has to follow you through your whole career.
Yeah, for sure. Is there any specific advice on what would you tell them to do to go get better at storytelling? Is there any like trainings or books, or would you just have them learn through experience?
I think the two things are true. There are interesting books. Honestly, I have never seen a course that is all about data and inside storytelling that really brings anything that really new. But I think there are interesting books that you can use to be specific about data storytelling. But even before, I would recommend learn about storytelling in general, because if you learn about how to tell stories, not specifically data storytelling, but if you learn how to tell stories, you will understand how to apply that to insights.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think in general, right? I don't know. Do you use storytelling at all in your personal life? Like intentionally, not just like I like to tell stories, but do you ever intentionally use storytelling to influence friends or family?
I sometimes do. I think a great way to tell a story quickly on the personal side is really giving people an example of what you're trying to talk, or why you're making that point. So I think I do. That's a very good question. I never thought about it, but I think I do. I think I tend to tell stories to prove my point on a personal side as well.
I mean, it's how human nature absorbs information, right? Has there been sort of veering from storytelling a little bit more to ESPN? I know this feels so cliche, but it feels impossible not to talk about it. How has COVID impacted the way that you're working or even delivering stories internally or externally in the world?
I can really divide that into two phases. I think the very first, let's say 2 to 3 months of the pandemic, from March to June or
Mm,
early July, the main challenge is that live sports were put on hold. So imagine that,
yeah.
I will never forget March 12th, we just heard, okay, everything that you had planned on your grid, planned on air, is not going to happen. So the very first role that we had was really to understand how fans were feeling about it. As our programming and production teams were really struggling to find relevant content to show viewers and fans at that time, our role was really tracking fan sentiment, was really tracking how fans felt. And ESPN launched at that very early time in the pandemic a campaign that just said, hey, we miss it too. We know you miss sports and we miss it too, so we know what you're going through. But that moment was really a struggle to bring relevant content from our archives, and the last dance that was supposed to premiere in July, bring it to June, to April, almost 3 months in advance. So how we
Mm-hmm.
really do what we can to be with fans, to provide that relief that fans love about sports. And the second phase is, as live sports were, back, we have a crazy crowded sports calendar now. There is a reason why there is a sports calendar, that not all the leagues and all, the competitions happen at the same time. So our big challenge now is to help fans navigate through such a complex environment. So everything is feels like everything is happening at the same time. About a month ago, we had what we call the sports equinox. In a single day, we had an NBA playoff game, we had an NFL game, we have U.S. Open tennis, and we had hockey playoffs all at the same time. So if you're a sports fan, our role is to really help you navigating all of that, right? And on top of all of it, you have more distractions, I want to say, than ever. You're worried as a fan, as a human being, you're worried about COVID. There is a very intense political, discussion going on right now. There's social justice discussion. So how we help fans
Mhm.
digesting and navigating all of that, still be in the reference in sports, but helping them in such a complex moment. I think that was phase two of pandemic.
Yeah, I have this vision of like super sports fans with like two laptops and a phone and an iPad watching 5 games at once. But also, probably, how do you create community? Because so much of sports and fandom is that idea of being around other fans. So I imagine you must have been innovative in how you created community remotely.
Yeah, this sense of community and the social aspect of sports is so important, right? So at this time where you don't have fans on stands, so you don't have fans in the arena, right? So that makes the
Mm-hmm.
experience feel different. And we also understand that a big segment of our viewers, of our fans, are what we call socializers. They actually
Mm-hmm.
appreciate sports because they love enjoying that with their family and friends. It's a social experience. So it still is a big challenge. It is still is, we are using technology more and more to allow fans to feel that social experience, to still have that social experience through technology. A great example,
Yeah.
if you have NBA fans watching, the NBA did a great job using Microsoft Teams to bring virtual fans to the
Oh,
stands, and through a special tool, you could not only be seen there, but you could interact with your fellow fans, with your fellow viewers. Uh,
that's cool.
it's the social aspect of sports, we know it's still not there, but I think in partnership with the leagues, we are trying our best to use technology to at least make fans feel a
Mm,
little bit closer to that social part of the experience that most of them love so much.
that's awesome. I love that. I'm gonna get vulnerable and share something with you, but you have to promise to still be my friend when I tell you this, okay? So I don't care at all about sports. I really don't. I love the 3 months where there was no sports, but I have a good friend who has this shirt that says "Go team, win the points," and she just wears it whenever she goes out to see other sports things. But I always laugh at that because it's like a lot of times I'll be like, "What sport is that you're talking about?" Anyway, but I appreciate what you do for the industry. All right, well, one final question, just a fun question, is because it's something I do care about. When you are able to finally get on a plane again for fun, where's the first place you're going to go?
That's a great question, and for me, it's very easy to answer. Uh, I want to see my family in Brazil. So I'm from Brazil, and the whole family is there.
Mm,
So when we finally get to fly again, I would take a long flight. I think most people will answer you with a short flight. I would take a long flight and go to Brazil, see my family and friends.
oh, sounds amazing. Can I come with you?
Absolutely.
I'll see you very soon.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful. Thank you. And speak soon.